Hormones are complex and they're very prone to stepping out of balance in our modern stress-filled, bad eating, exercise-deprived lifestyles. Hormones include the likes of sex hormones, stress hormones, blood sugar regulating hormones, thyroid hormones. And out of that list, I'm immediately going to put the blood sugar regulating hormones to the side because we're going to go in depth in blood sugar regulation later this week. Instead, with a very funky diagram, I'm going to explain the HPA axis to you. H stands for hypothalamus and P stands for pituitary. They're two little glands that sit in the base of the brain, which together are like the conductor of an orchestra. In response to demand, they release hormones that go to the gonads, which is ovaries in women and testes in the men, the adrenal glands, which is what A stands for in HPA, and our thyroid gland in our neck. If too much of any one particular hormone is being produced, there'll be a negative feedback loop to the hypothalamus and pituitary to try and decrease their outflow. It's a lovely homeostatic mechanism, but there's one thing that gets in our way, and that's our mind. If we have a deadline to meet, if we need to do a training session, if we need to pick up the kids from school, if it's culturally unacceptable to lie down in the middle of your office during your afternoon slump, then what happens is the higher centers of the mind kick in and ignore these feedback loops and tell you to get on with it nonetheless. On this diagram, pretend that the adrenals, the thyroid and the gonads are the children and the hypothalamus and pituitary are the mum and dad. So it's a happy family, hopefully. But what happens when one kid is naughty? And that usually is the adrenal gland. It demands all the attention. What happens to the other two children? They become deprived of the attention. That's what's denoted by the arrows in this diagram. The adrenals are being pushed too hard, and then the thyroid and the gonads don't receive enough input. And it's a very common scenario, especially when weight management is a concern, especially with sluggish weight. You know, people who are doing repetitive diets and it's not working anymore. It's because their thyroid or their sex hormone function is diminished, which can be a real problem and quite difficult to treat. So it's clear that stress is bad for us. This is a lovely book that I refer to often, and it's got a table that demonstrates the effects of cortisol, which is the main stress hormone, on body composition. In terms of what to do about stress, well, that's coming up a bit later in the course. But for now, I'm going to give you a few tips about what you can do to keep your thyroid healthy and your gonads, i.e. your sex hormones, healthy. Nutritionally, for direct thyroid health, I would recommend the nutrients iodine, selenium and zinc. Where do they come from? Broccoli, of course, but also seaweed, pumpkin seeds and Brazil nuts. For healthy estrogen levels, the first thing you have to do is avoid xenoestrogens as much as possible. Xeno means foreign, so it's chemicals that man has produced that has a similar effect in the body to estrogen, but it's a much more powerful than estrogen. We get it in pesticides, we get it in plastics, we get it in our drinking water. So we need to be very, very, very vigilant about xenoestrogens. I'm meeting young men now with quite female type bodies with softer skin and higher percentage body fat. Phytoestrogens, on the other hand, that means plant estrogens. They have a soft estrogenic effect on the body and can actually be quite therapeutic. So for some women and even some men, I'll recommend phytonutrients. They come in the form of alfalfa sprouts. Flax seeds can be quite effective, green tea, and the best known one is soya. But not just any old soya like soya milk or tofu or something. It has to be fermented sources. So miso is probably the best known one. Tempeh is another one that you can put in stir fries. Now, one of the worst things you can do for your hormones is what a lot of you are already doing to try and balance your weight, and that is undereat and overexercise. You're just going to diminish all your hormonal levels, and it's going to make it much, much harder for you to lose body fat again.